this is Amy at the Hag Reads. I am coming here with my first non-newbie video. I came in right at the end of the month with my first introductory video, and I have read 43 books this month. Don't get excited. A lot of them were children's fiction, and they just read a lot faster than just about anything else. But that's a lot to review in one video, especially it being my first real video. So I'm just going to start with a weekly wrap-up, and I think I'll continue on with that for the foreseeable future, running from Monday to Sunday. This week's is for the 24th through the 30th, and I read 13 books. The breakdown on that is 7 children's fiction, 3 YA, 2 adult fiction, and 1 adult nonfiction book. And so I will just jump right into that and start talking about the books. The first book I read was Behind Her Eyes by Sara Pineborough, which is a psychological thriller. And I enjoyed it. I figured out the thing she kind of beats around the bush about for the entire video, or for the entire book, right up until the end. I figured that out really early on. And then I figured out the ending less than halfway through, and so I'm always a little bit disappointed in a book that I can figure it out early on. I'm okay if it's kind of towards the end and I'm like, oh, I get it. And sometimes I never figure it out, which is, that's good too. When you completely stump me, that's awesome. But this one I figured out way early, and so I always do find that a little disappointing. Overall, though, I felt like the ending with what happened was something that's kind of unique in the genre. I don't think I've seen it before. I'm not that widely read with psychological thrillers. I would like to read more of them in the future. But from my experience with what I've read, the ending felt fairly unique and original. And so before that I was kind of leaning for 2.5 to 3 stars, and I wound up giving it 4 because of that. The second book I read this week was The Shadow Queen, which is the first book in the Ravenspire series by C.J. Redwine. And I did enjoy that, although it did not get a lot of super great reviews on Goodreads. I saw quite a few 2- and 3-star reviews once I had gone in and put in my star review. I don't do any written reviews on there as of yet. I haven't for a long time written a book review of anything, so I don't know if I have plans to do that in the future. I'll have to think about it. But I gave it a star review, and then I generally will go and look and see what other people thought as well, just to get a feel for it overall. Some of the comments were that it was boring, they didn't like any of the characters, they felt very one-dimensional and stereotypical, and then someone, or maybe several people, mentioned that there's been a lot of this type of book, and there has, and that they saw a lot of similarities between this particular book and the TV show, which the name of it escapes me right now. But it was on, it's been on Netflix, and I think it's still an ongoing series. Within the main character, Snow White, it has all of the fairy tale characters, and it's kind of an alt world in the present time. And I do see the point there. It is similar, and there are a lot of retellings being published right now, and that have been published recently. But also, Snow White seems to be the most popular one, maybe outside of something like Alice in Wonderland, which gets a lot of attention as well, I think. So that's a valid point. But overall, I like the world. I like the characters. They weren't super unique, but they didn't fall flat for me. So I gave it a 3 overall it was just a good read, a light, easy, not overly, I didn't have to think about it real hard. So I was entertained, 3 stars. The third book that I finished this week was Dead Insider, which is part of the Loon Lake Cozy Mystery series. And this is a fishing cozy mystery series. And I am not at all a fan of fishing, but I really enjoy this series a lot. And I will continue to read it. This was book number 13. So I won't really go into it. What I'll say is the characters are all older, and I think that's kind of what draws me to it. They're probably retirement age for the dentist slash forensic person in the mystery series. I think the police chief, who is probably mid-50s or so. Another main character's in their 30s. They do have younger characters. They're the children and grandchildren of this group of main characters. And then, people from the town. It's set in a small town. And so you get a good mix, but I like that the core cast of characters is older. And there's some romance in this, but it's not the main focus, and it's kind of a down-to-earth, low-key kind of part of the series. It's not the main focus. So I do like those aspects of it. I will continue to read. The author published I think the 16th book in the series just this past year in 2016. So it looks like maybe the Victoria Houston is putting out one book a year, so I can hope that maybe there'll be a few more. They are fairly short. Most of them come in at just over 200 pages. So it's an easy, light read. It's kind of a feel-good thing. It would be like if you just went and watched, a couple episodes of TV, that kind of time-wasty thing. The fourth book I read this month was Cannibalism, A Perfectly Natural History by Bill Schutt. And I have to say, it wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't a great book for me. I think for most people, this would probably be a fairly fascinating read. But for the second half of the book, they deal with human cannibalism throughout history, with a big focus on the Donner Party. So, which is fairly typical when people think of cannibalism. That's the big one I think that comes up. And there's a few others. They go into some depth with some anthropological stuff. And so from that respect, just for the mainstreaming of the Donner Party and my background at university, I was fairly familiar with most of that information, and so I didn't get a lot out of it that was new to me. And then for the first half of the book, I found that much more interesting. It was more of the other species that engage in cannibalistic activities and some of the things that are not necessarily full truth. They, kind of the urban legends of the cannibalism in the animal world. I found that very interesting. And where it talks more about the circumstances under which cannibalism happens in nature, I found that to be very interesting. The book does not deal at all really with serial killers except in a superficial way, and I think that adds to it. Instead of going for the most sensational thing and focusing on that, I like that it was just a very small part. Overall, I gave it 3 stars, but I would recommend it to anybody interested in it. I did find a lot of the not human stuff to be kind of iggy. I don't deal well with bugs, and especially like crickets, praying mantises, cockroaches, that sort of thing. So my son came in several times while I was reading. He's like, that look on your face, what are you reading that you have that look? And it's just that bug stuff grosses me out as much as it fascinates me. And so sometimes I struggle with it. And I'm not necessarily afraid of spiders. Like, I don't kill them in my house unless, like, they're in my bed. I'm okay to share my house with you. You eat bugs, you're good. But I don't want you in my bed. So, but I would definitely recommend it to people who want to read more about this, if you can stomach the buggy portions of it. I didn't have any trouble with the human part of it, and maybe that's just because I have been exposed to the material before. So that's my feelings on that. The next book I read would be, let's see, sorry, is a YA book, The 13 Chairs by Dave Shelton. This was a collection of short stories. I think it's the kind of thing that, you know, an author or a publishing house puts out in the fall around Halloween. The stories were fairly short. They all have that kind of slow build feel to them. And there was kind of a secondary story going on with the characters in the 13 chairs that I thought had, was kind of cute and interesting and a unique take. But all the stories, were reminiscent of the type of horror stories that you see from like Edgar Allan Poe and other various places. Very standard for the genre, short and sweet. It would be an easy read for it's rated YA, but I would say advanced younger readers probably would do okay with it. I didn't think there was anything particularly frightening in there, but I thought it was well done, and I gave it a 3. Sorry for the break in there. My notes got kind of mixed up. The last book I read that was not children's fiction was a YA dystopian, The Murder Complex. And for me, this felt a lot like it was a mashup of Hunger Games, The Maze Runner, and The Divergent. A lot of very similar concepts there. I didn't hate it, but it didn't wow me at all. Like, I didn't feel like there was anything really very unique about the story or the characters. It had that kind of insta-love thing going on, which, bleh. You got to know somebody a little bit longer. That part of YA never appeals to me. But overall, I don't want to give anything away beyond what I've already said. I gave it 3 stars just because I did want to read to the end, and I will read the next book in the series to see where they go with it. Maybe it will become slightly more unique as the series goes on. But it was just an okay read. It wasn't fantastic, and there wasn't much about it that stood out. The remainder of my reading, the 7 books that remain, are all children's fiction, and 5 of them were from the Nancy Drew series, books 9 through 13, and 2 of them were from the Hardy Boys series, books 1 and 2. I made it kind of a goal last year to work my way through the Goosebumps series, and I'm near the end, and I reached a point with that series where I have to physically get the books myself. I can't check them out of the library. I have read through everything that's available digitally or physically through my library system, and so that left maybe 18 or 20 books, which I have probably collected about 10 of, and so I'm just waiting until I have the rest of them so I could just read through them real quick. But I also, at the time I decided to do that, as I was getting closer to the end and the books were becoming more scarce, I thought, why not look at the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys series again? And I obviously started picking up Nancy Drew first because I've gotten further along with that. Having read a few from both series now, though, they both are dated, definitely. And I know that Nancy Drew the original Nancy Drew mysteries have undergone some revision to remove racist things and non-politically correct things. Although they do still manage to sneak in. There was one book, and I don't remember which one, where all the girls dressed up as squaws. So it's still in there a little bit, but overall, it's very 1950s, very gender normative. Nancy is definitely privileged. I think the Hardy Boys and the whole Hardy family are presented more upper middle class or middle class, kind of blue collar. He's a detective. Nancy Drew's mother is gone, so there's a maid, so she's got a little more autonomy, and it's her father that's raising her rather than her mother, so she's more assertive than maybe a girl raised in a traditional family at that time might have been. Whereas with the Hardy Boys, the mom cooks and cleans and makes them picnic lunches. Very traditional gender roles there. And the father is absent a lot. He goes away for cases. and they're just starting to get involved in this as part of his investigations. And there's a little bit of a competitive thing. With the Hardy Boys, I noticed there's more of a tendency to solve a problem with fists, and there's a lot more guys in the story. Whereas with Nancy Drew, it's very proper. The girls are always changing their clothes because they got mussed up a little bit. Ooh. Um, and the boys will get scuffed up and dirty, but they're not so inclined to run off and change their clothes and fix their hair. So I find that an interesting contrast. Overall, I'm enjoying both series, despite their, you have to look at the time it was written in. I find them to be entertaining, easy reads. I can knock one out in probably around an hour, and I don't read terribly quickly. I know that there are some people on here that read a lot of books really fast, and I just don't do that. But I'm going to continue with both series, and with Nancy Drew, there are many iterations. I'll probably slowly work my way through those, although it'll probably take several years. So I will come back on Wednesday with a kind of a month recap in terms of what genres I read, how many books overall. I do keep a page count, and I'll get more into that with my next video, but that's all I have for today, and I hope that I wasn't too boring. I did not think this would run quite as long, so I will work on the umming and awing and the pauses, and so I apologize for those, but I'm new to this, and I am not overly inclined to edit all of that out. It just seems like a waste of time. If you can't live with it, maybe my videos aren't for you, and it will get better in the future as I get more comfortable with this. So thanks for watching if you made it all the way through, and have a great whatever time of day it is for you. Bye!